Rust is a game of resource gathering and technological advancement that rewards aggression and dishonesty. The goal of today's guide is to introduce you to the different resources in the world of Rust, teach you how to gather them, and most importantly, teach you why you need them. In my last guide, I discussed wood and why it was important in the world of Rust, and somehow that guide ended up being over 20 minutes long. This guide is not going to be nearly as long. Today we're going to be discussing stone, which is kinda meh. Stone has one primary function in the world of Rust, and that is to be used as a building material. If it hasn't become obvious yet, I intend on doing a building guide shortly in the future, and beforehand I would like to cover all of the materials used in building and discuss their costs. It is impossible for you to understand how much more valuable one resource is than another until you have actually gathered it or at least understand where it comes from. Stone is basically the Goldilocks building material, where it is not the strongest, but is far from the weakest. Stronger materials like twig and wood have a number of disadvantages that stone simply doesn't share. Moving up to stronger materials like metal and high quality metal will get you extra protection from explosives, but there's no real weaknesses that those cover up except for need more explosives. Therefore, stone is a really good middle ground option. Is also the strongest material you have access to without a furnace or recycling. Furthermore, the stronger materials that you can build your base out of have a lot of different things competing for that material. If I want to make my base entirely of metal, I'm going to have a hard time crafting SARs and roadside kits. And likewise, if I want to make it entirely of high quality metal, I'm not going to be able to craft AKs and heavy metal armor for a while. But stone, crafting your base out of stone means you have less stone, and that's really the only drawback. So from the early game to the late game, you're going to use some amount of stone in your base until you're simply too big. Eventually, as your base grows, you're going to want it to be more and more secure, and you're going to upgrade your walls. But in doing so, you start to look like a juicy target. Everybody wants to blow up the entirely metal base, but a stone base isn't as appealing. So what people typically do is they put a layer of stone around their base, and then they upgrade the inner walls. This allows you to gain the benefit of extra strength from upgrading your walls, as well as an entire layer of strength from the stone walls around it without looking as rich as you actually are, meaning you're less likely to actually have your base broken into. But at a certain point, it starts to become impractical to build your base any bigger, and you just have to start going with stronger and stronger, and stone starts to have no purpose. High external stone walls can be placed around the outside of your base, giving you a quasi-safe zone around the outside of your building where you can place large furnaces, oil refineries, or low-value loot. It is relatively easy for people to climb over them using ladders or to fly over them using a minicopter. However, you can hear a minicopter coming, and ladders cause them to take a lot of damage and nearly die in the journey, as well as making a lot of noise and moving very slowly. So if you're around and you hear and see somebody trying to climb over your walls, it's only 1 or 2 shots to actually kill them and steal what little they have on them. People don't typically climb over your walls loaded with loot, so don't expect this to be a profitable endeavor. But as your supplies of stone continue to build up, and you start having less and less things to do with it, it starts becoming quite viable to bring it to Outpost. See, the vending machines at Outpost are willing to give you 500 wood in exchange for 150 stone. Or in other words, 3 stacks of stone will get you 20 stacks of wood. If you watch my last video on gathering wood, you know that it can be a time-consuming, loud, and potentially quite hazardous experience. So avoiding this risk can be quite beneficial, and generally, farming stone is much quieter, and with this really good exchange rate, if you ignore the trip to Outpost, you can gather wood much quicker by actually gathering stone and trading it out. If your base location makes reaching Outpost every time you need a little bit extra wood quite unreasonable, you also have the option of placing a vending machine in your base that exchanges stone for wood. Obviously, you'll have to have a more aggressive pricing model than Outpost. Anyone in Outpost has the option of simply spending 20 scrap to send a delivery drone to your house that will pick up your stone and drop off some wood for you. If your prices are aggressive enough and they can turn a profit doing this, then people will be more than happy to take you up on the deal that essentially ends up being, do you want free money? While we are in Outpost, there are a couple extra deals that you should be aware of. You can purchase 1,000 stone for 50 scrap, or you can purchase 500 stone for 1,000 wood. Both of these are, well, they're terrible deals, but they're both considerably better than getting raided. So in the early game, if you can't find any stone nodes, it would be a better idea to trade in a little bit of wood and secure your base properly, or give up a little bit of scrap than it would be to let somebody else raid your base and set you back. Now granted, you're not going to lose a lot of material this early in the game, but any setback is negative. Stone is used in the crafting of furnaces, but this is not a very large consumer of your stone supply. Stone barricades are a good thing to have handy if you think you might get into a fight. Simply placing a couple of them down and ducking behind them generates instant cover, which can be quite handy when people are shooting at you. They can also be placed in doorways. This can be beneficial in a raid environment, where taking the time to place a door, place a lock, and then race to put the code in before the other player might take too long, but quickly throwing down a block of stone in the way is enough to make sure that they can't walk through. Granted, they can still shoot you, but if you stay clear of the doorway, you might be able to avoid unwanted guests. Stone barricades can also be crafted by default and don't need a workbench, meaning it's great for when you're wandering around. If you find some stone, you can generate some cover in advance. If you have some time to plan a level 2 workbench and the proper blueprints, you can craft high external walls, either from stone, which is relevant for this video, or wood from the last video, since I didn't really cover them in that spot. The high external walls can be placed anywhere that you have building privilege, or at least nobody else has building privilege, generating instant cover that doesn't require you to duck, and it is also wide enough that people can't cover both sides of it effectively, giving you a little bit of counterplay. They are rather expensive at 1,500 stone a piece, but 1,500 stone to save a full metal AK kit seems like a very reasonable investment. High external stone gates cost 3,000 stone and 5 gears. These are one of the options for opening a hole in your ring of high external walls. If you were to build a wall entirely around your base with no door in it, it's not a very good base anymore now, is it? Typically, however, people tend to go for guardhouses for a little bit extra security and for more responsive doors. One way to collect stone is to take any of these previously mentioned items to a recycler. Some other notable things that have stone in their crafting recipe would be stone tools as well as stone spears. We also can't forget that the rock that we spawn with can be crafted for 10 stone, meaning you get 5 stone for recycling it. Crafting the rock you spawn with might not be worth it, but if you are on a mission to collect as many rocks and torches as you can, these will eventually add up, and an inventory's worth can be, well, an amount of stone. I wouldn't say that it's profitable by any means, but it's there if you need it. Small stone pickups can be found across the map, similar to the stumps for wood. You don't need any tool to pick them up, and doing so will grant you 50 stone immediately. There is also nothing more frustrating than when you need wood and you forgot your rock, and now you have to go looking around for one of these things to craft a rock just to bring down a tree to get some wood. Stone nodes can be found anywhere along the map, and they're worth 1,000 stone apiece. They are more commonly found closer to rocky areas like cliffs and mountains. This makes them incredibly common in the snow biome, and a bit rare in flat plains areas. Areas with lots of trees can also make it harder to see them, where open areas like the desert and, again, the snow biome makes it very easy to see nodes of all kinds, including stone. It is not uncommon for people to have 2 separate bases, one their main base that they play the game out of, and a second, much smaller base in some isolated, snowy area surrounded by nodes, both stone and otherwise. This can make farming a lot easier, but it means you have to transport your stuff back home at some point. If you have multiple players and a little bit of creativity, you can use the drone delivery system and a little bit of scrap to make this easier for yourself. Like with wood, the tool that you use to gather a stone node will affect the percentage of the stone that you get from it. It will also greatly affect the amount of time it takes to gather it. The first tool you have access to is your rock. You get one for free, and like mentioned before, you can craft one for 10 stone. Like with the big red X's on trees, there's a glimmer spot on each node. Hitting this will do extra damage to the node and gather extra stone with every hit, meaning it will take far less hits to break the stone node, and you will gather the stone much more quickly. With hitting all of the critical hits, it takes about 24 seconds for you to gather a stone node using a rock, and if you ignore all of them, or for example, it's nighttime and you can't see them and have no other choice, it'll take you about 1 minute and 10 seconds to break them all. The stone will gather a measly 375 stone from your node, or in other words, you have a 37.5% efficiency, which is not very good, but it's considerably better than nothing. A bone club can be crafted for 20 bone fragments, will increase your yield to 45%, or 450 stone per node. It can harvest a node in 18 seconds if you land all of your critical hits, and takes about 51 seconds if you ignore them. A salvage hammer is an unlockable blueprint that can be crafted at a tier 1 workbench. It costs 1 pipe and 50 metal frags. Using it, you will harvest 536 stone per node in about 9 seconds with the criticals and about 19 seconds without it. Do not use a salvage hammer. Do not ever use a salvage hammer. The stone pickaxe, aside from being a straight upgrade to the salvage hammer in every way imaginable, is a default blueprint that does not require a workbench. You can craft one for 200 wood and 100 stone. Once you do so, you will get 794 stone from each stone node, or in other words, you'll have 79.4% efficiency. It also takes about the same amount of time as using the salvage hammer. There are 3 remaining tools that we're going to discuss, and each of them has a 100% efficiency. Or in other words, you will gather all 1,000 stone from the stone node regardless of which tool you choose to use. The difference among the 3 is the speed at which it takes you to gather it. The first option that we have available is the pickaxe. This is a tier 1 item and it costs 100 wood and 125 metal fragments to craft. It can farm a node in 12 seconds if you hit all of your critical hits, and 27 seconds if you miss them. A salvage pickaxe requires a blueprint and a tier 2 workbench. It costs 1 pipe and 5 blades. It can harvest a node in 5 seconds if you intentionally miss the first critical hit and hit the next 2. 13 seconds if you miss all of them. So missing all of your critical hits with a salvage pickaxe is roughly the same as hitting all of them with a metal pickaxe. The jackhammer is an uncraftable item. You can find them in the world naturally in airdrops or occasionally in toolboxes or sunken crates. Alternatively, you can buy them at outposts for 150 scrap. It will harvest a node in about 1 to 3 seconds. There's a very simple reason why you can craft a chainsaw to use for wood, but you can't craft a jackhammer to use for stone. And that is that a jackhammer can quickly destroy the soft side of stone walls, and with relative ease, you can even go through the hard side of stone if you'd like to. If you're particularly dedicated and have a number of jackhammers on hand, you can even cut through the soft side of stronger materials without using any sulfur, making these incredibly valuable and a little overpowered. If they were craftable, they would be full-on broken. So if you find one, please do not recycle it. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you know what the bell button does, feel free to press that as well, but I couldn't tell ya.